Hi, everyone. Welcome to Turning Point. I'm your host, Blaine Birch. And joining me today is Monique Allen from the Garden Continuum, CEO of the Garden Continuum. Thanks so much for joining me today, Monique.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here with you.
Yeah, we've just we're chatting a little bit before the show and actually comparing notes on the fall and how the weather's changing. And then I was going to ask you, I'm assuming that's going to really change the way you do work as you start getting into winter, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So every season is different. And so we just, you sort of have this encapsulated service model for every season because, I'm New England in the United States and in Massachusetts. And so our seasons are deep and they're different. And so you got to be ready. Your clothes change, your approach change, your hydration changes.
Yeah. No, that's well, I guess before we dive into the Garden Continuum, I would like to ask you, like, how did you get started? Like, as an entrepreneur or a business, or what got you interested in it?
Yeah, my dad is an immigrant. He immigrated in the mid 60s. And I was born shortly after, and his family was self-employed in the Middle East.
Okay.
They had a commercial refrigeration, great thing to have in the Middle East, and air conditioning. Yeah. And so my father was old. My whole mind, self-employed it was right.
Yeah.
And then when I was in high school, when I first started, my dad opened a gourmet cheese and sandwich shop. He still had the other business. He was a serial entrepreneur. He was always making a deal. Yeah. And so I actually had to get working papers to be able to work because I was so young. I think I just turned 14. And I worked at that cheese shop all the way until I graduated high school, where I was actually managing the cheese shop on the weekends. And so again, it didn't seem like a big leap. It was always a thing. And then the more I dug, I realized there were a lot of people in my family. My grandmother on my mother's side, she owned a nursery for kids. Yeah. I think also in the 60s, probably started in the earlier 60s up through the 70s. And this was a time when self-employment wasn't as big a thing, and certainly women weren't being self-employed. Yeah. So I think there must be something in my DNA. And so I started really early, and I actually, started in this industry at 18, started landscaping. Wow. And by the time I was 21, I had a full-fledged business.
Oh, wow. So that's amazing, because I do hear that quite often from entrepreneurs, that they tend to start early, but not often like first step out of the gate. So that's really neat. We've had a couple that have done it, but it's usually there's a little bit of a few years of fighting in the trenches first. So so how did you, like, from 18 to 21? That is a really quick sort of transition. Yeah. Where did you start, like, working for someone else? How was and then move into building your own enterprise, or how did you do that?
Yeah, so you said about being in the trenches, or I was definitely in there. I just didn't want to stay. Yeah. But for me, I just stumbled on landscaping. The whole beginning part of my book is really talking about, how I got into it. It was kind of like a job turns into a career, turns into a life, right? And so when I first started, it was a gig to make more money. I was working in a clothing store. I was making like $4 an hour. Yes, I'm that old. And, then I was going to make $7 an hour landscaping, and I was getting cash, right? So that felt really great. And I was outside and not in a, icky department store. So I did that. And then I thought I died and went to heaven. I sort of had a bit of trauma as a young person. And I don't think I knew it then, but I definitely did. I was kind of spinning. And when my hands hit the ground, when I started working, it was like coming home. Blaine, I got to tell you, I knew my name, that I had come home. I had no idea what that meant, but it's kind of like somebody pulls up a veil and says, oh, look at this. Yeah. And you've never seen it before. And I saw it and I couldn't get enough of it. And I sort of told a person and told a person, my mother connected me to someone. And I ended up meeting an awesome landscape designer, a woman, and I pretty much apprenticed with her for 2 full years. And
wow.
she was awesome. She was like 13 years older, maybe than me, maybe not that much. Maybe I'm exaggerating, but she seemed a lot older than me at the time. And I was messy. And so she helped to regulate me, keep me on track. And she was teaching me this beautiful world. She encouraged me. She said, look, you can do this, but you should study it. And you should get an adjunct career. You should do something else. So she said, because this is New England and you're not going to be able to make a living doing this. You're going to need something else. And she worked in a hospital in radiology and did this on the side. But it was big. And so she taught me really early out that I needed to have something else. Well, the something else I picked was bookkeeping and accounting.
Oh, okay.
And I followed the track and I studied landscape design, horticulture, and botany. But then I went to college. I got a degree in entrepreneurship. But my work in the winter, I worked with an accounting firm for 10 years. And so I was balancing working in the field and learning with having this other career that was showing me that lots of people were self-employed.
Yeah.
And so my eyes got big, my brain got all exploded. And I said to her, I'm like, come on, let's build this business. Let's build this business. And she didn't want to. And I, no disrespect, she just liked her gig.
Yeah.
And I wanted to build something. So I just, at 20 years old, I kind of started. And then by the time I was 21, I'll never forget it. I sold my first 5-figure job. And nice. I didn't know what audacity, mixed with some learning, but that's why it happened so young.
Yeah. So how did you, I just want to kind of go back to that. Like, so you, because I remember a little bit when I sort of ventured out on my own, and I had worked for maybe about 3 years after college, and then went, nah, I'm just going to do this, on my own. And somehow, sort of like you, just like somehow found my first clients. And how did that, was that your first, was that the first client, or was that like the first sort of bigger one where you just, and how did you do that? I want to a little bit of how the process, how you found them and sold them and everything else.
Yeah, so interesting, because that was a really different world. Like my first cell phone was like a briefcase.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was like and then it was a shoe phone, they did. So we didn't even have the internet. So the way I started would be very different than the way somebody else would start now. But I do believe that there are some seeds of what I did that they may be old fashioned, but they're highly relational. You talk a lot, you talk to a lot of people. I got connected with contractors. So I immediately kind of went on the opposite track than a lot of garden designers, which oftentimes were women. I wanted to know the contractors. So I sort of went toward the guys, and I said, look, you don't do this, but I can do this. I can do the flowers. I can do all the pretty, you guys do the heavy lifting, but I'm going to make the place beautiful. And so because it wasn't popular at that point, the way it is now, people were telling people about me, and that was working really well. And then I joined, at the time it was called the New England Women's Business Owners Group. And it was really promoting woman-owned businesses. And I was just getting in rooms and talking to people, making as many relationship connections as I could. My mother knew people, my mother's friends knew people. And so I really just started, and then really wanted to delight and deliver to my clients. And the word of mouth was fabulous, and it really paid off. But I will tell you that I got into the marketing end of things very quickly. So it was before blogs and before anything digital. So I actually started writing a newsletter that I think I still had to lick the stamp and put it on and fold it and put it in the mail. And so I started to build it that way. So I think structurally and strategically, all of this stuff is the underpinnings to digital, but I was really trying to build relationships right out of the gate with clients, and that served me really well.
Well, and the interesting thing that you brought up, and it really is like a brilliant move to get that moving, is it's the same thing you have to do now, is this one to many, and you found your way to do one to many through kind of like your channel partner and your events, which could be today, could be a webinar. It's the same thing, is it's the one to many. And then the other thing you brought up that I think is so critical is relationships. That's so much how business is done. People, you have to build those relationships and gain that trust of your client. And that's and then the marketing is oftentimes just trying to amp that up and do the same thing, but it's building that relationships, and you're not going door to door. You'll be able to talk to the whole neighborhood. It's a really smart way to do it, and very fundamental, which is what people are trying to figure out today too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that it's about the added value. It's the additional piece that you're giving to somebody, that caring, for me, the work I do working with the land, with nature, it requires a lot of caring in my mind, because I've never wanted to go so fast that I ran over the planet, ran over it. And because I was doing it slow, because I was developing this lifescape method, it allowed me to connect to clients, but ultimately it also allowed me to connect to my staff. And so the whole channel of business building ended up being relational, whether I was relating out, relating one to many, one to one, relating to contractors, relating to designers, relating to the industry. It all came back to how I was showing up. And as I said, I got into this work as with a bit of trauma, with a bit of, I was angry. I had a lot of anger, and it was easy to fall into the way contractors can be, which is, kind of loud and sweary and kind of let's pitch a fit, and that's how we get things done. And I realized that I was never going to get anywhere that way, So I had to do personal work, and every time I would move up, new level, new devil, right? Every time I would cycle up in business, I would realize I was on a new level, and there was going to be a new devil that was going to push on those old triggers, and I was going to have to learn something new. And I've looked at building business as this evolutionary relationship building with myself, and then with, the public, which is going to be the people that we provide service for, and the incredibly important people that are people who work for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's that other whole side, is having that engaged team is so critical, and it's hard. It's you have to have the right people, and I've been very fortunate in my work life to have very few poor fits, I'm going to call them. And every once in a while, and that's where, I kind of count my lucky stars, because I would have a poor fit and it would affect everything and everybody, because it's a smaller business, right? Everybody knows everybody. And it's so, like, I'm so appreciative of, like the team I have now. They're great, and they get along, and everyone's pulling in the same direction. And that's a precious and difficult thing to build, especially now. It's hard to hire people, right? And to find the right culture fit.
Yeah. And I would imagine that the reason you can sit here and say that your team is pointed in the right direction is because you are highlighting that direction. You are creating the vision. You are recruiting people that have alignment with a set of values, and then you're pointing your team. And as a CEO, as a founder, when you're looking at how Dryrun is moving, I'm sure what you're doing is you're going, oh, wait a second, come back this way, come back. It's always having your your sights set on what is the vision for the company. And that vision is not like, you don't set it and forget it.
Yeah.
That vision evolves with you. And so I imagine that the reason you can say that is because you've done that work, right? You've invested in your team.
Yeah. And that is such an ongoing challenge. I love the term new level, new devil. And being in the software space like this, man, we have to react so fast. And I always look at it as virtually every quarter you're learning something big and you're taking that next big step, and you're trying to find that way through it. And to keep the team motivated and learn from them. It's like, I need the information from you guys, and then it can, and then we can think about, now here's where we go to the next one. And but in our space, it changes so quickly that it's that's a challenge, because there's always a little bit of those adjustments, like you talked about, are quite rapid where we're at, until you find that space. You're like, that's where we go, that we're going. Okay, we've learned something, a little bit of an adjustment. Right. And it's hard, because you'd have to keep everyone engaged and really understand where we're going. But a lot of times it's like, pretty sure this is where to go. That's not 100% till we try it, right? So
right.
It's a challenge.
It is a challenge. And I think if you look at, so like your space, being in sort of more of a tech space, right? And the financials and that kind of thing, like there's a lot of things that are moving. Interestingly, though, even though I'm not in the tech space and I'm not in a financial business, I use tech and I have to watch my financials, and I get to deal with the weather. And the fact that climate change, wherever you stand on climate change, I can tell you from a consumption and a fulfillment side of things, it feels different. Being outside in August is different than it was 10 years ago. Totally different. Building a rainwater system now, totally different than 10 years ago. It's really, just totally shifting the way all the stormwater maps were, changed 10 or so years ago. And it's just been changing. Our events are different. They're longer, they're deeper, they're stronger. And then there's big gaps. And so I think that all business needs to consider the rapid nature of how all commerce is changing. And then there's this other amazing thing that's changing. I just read a 2021 report from my industry, from the National Association of Landscape Professionals, about employment diversity. And some of the statistics were astounding. By 2030, over 20% of our population will be over 65. That we're going from pillar to post. In other words, we're going from, high birth rate, and then the death rate, it keeps, as you get older, more people die, and it's like a point at the top. So a lot of people are dead by 85, right? It goes at a point. Now, not a lot of people are being born, and the population is not dying off. We've got an old population. It's going up like a post.
Oh,
and so that means that what we're feeling right now, post-pandemic, around hiring, and around the whole team building, culture building, whatever, this isn't like a little blip that's just going to go away. This is a sea change happening, where people who want jobs, they don't want to put up with it anymore. They want something different. They've gotten savvy over the pandemic and now. And so I think your point about the vision, it's like, I think that's where it is. And now we got to push, we could go this way a little, go that way a little. I think all entrepreneurs need to kind of lift their heads up and look at their industry in particular, and look at how we consume services now, and really watch out for what's going to come down the pike. And for me, especially in the organizational piece, like how you're building your organization with people.
Yeah. And that's changed so incredibly rapidly. And you know, we were kind of fortunate because our team was all remote to start with. That's just how we built the business. And you know, a big part of that was it kind of came from me because I was spending half the year in the States and half the year in Canada and just getting away from the cold, to be completely honest. And you know, and started to, you know, and then I started to find people that were like, oh, this is great. This is really, you know, you find great people like, well, I don't care where they're at. They're really terrific. And so we started to build that team that way. And then the pandemic hit and we were kind of like, well, that's what we're already doing it. We're really fortunate that way. But as we've grown our team, that like I have people on my team I've never met in person yet, which is a little weird. And at some point we have to do that, right?
You have to do a get together.
Well, yeah, at some point when we can actually all you know, travel again. It's still a little tricky, but it's getting close, close. But we watch all these other businesses sort of rapidly try and figure that out and change. And the nice thing is it's sort of fallen more into our vein. So now our sales process and everything, it's like, yeah, everyone's on Zoom now. You know, so we're selling to everyone in the world, but really North America is our main market. And so but now people are used to doing that, which made our job actually easier. So it's been such a major change, but you know, it's like I said, we still haven't got together as like parts of our team have got together and when they're in a similar region, but we still haven't got our whole team together. And so now you have these culture challenges that are different that we never had to deal with really before.
Yeah, absolutely. And the interesting thing, so my industry is very different. You know, we're all in person and we ended up on the essentials list. So we just kept working. We closed for 1 week and, you know, I do a lot of work in legislation. So we weren't on the essentials list initially. And we just dealt with, you know, worked with our legislators and our lobbyists to make sure that the landscape could get out there. But interestingly, I had already gone pretty digital at this point, and I was already doing all of my first sales calls on a phone, not video, but just on phone. And I was already doing some review meetings, and all my coaching services were already on. I was using GoToMeeting, and they were already set up, and so I didn't skip a beat, and I just shifted so that I did all my design presentations and all of that client interface. I just moved it all online, and it was super easy. And then, you know, the things that we have to do in person, we do in person, because clearly I can't build your landscape from my office. I have to actually go there. But that innovation that any company, like if your industry doesn't use those things, it's like, it's not like you just use them for 2020 and 2021, like keep using them, keep figuring out how to weave digital. I've been involved in the Inbound conference this week that HubSpot and you know, do you know HubSpot? Do you know that group?
Familiar with them.
So that's our platform. So we do all inbound marketing, and they put this big conference on that was it's in Boston. And last year it was online, and this year it's online. And it's been really interesting to hear them talk about AI and B2B and just, you know, online commerce and how online commerce has gone up. And it's hard for a company like a landscape company to think that that has anything to do with them. But I'm here to tell you that it has something to do with every industry, that we all need to be thinking about how to connect digitally and figure out a way to really engage, you know. So the rules around engagement with your team, like when we do trainings, everybody has to have their camera on. There's no, like, it's just, we try really hard to make sure that everybody is showing up in a way that can build rapport, even though they're on Zoom. I really think I think businesses really need to embrace, even if it's just a little bit, and definitely in their sales funnel, how they're using the video?
Oh, it's swung so far one way, it's not coming back. It might swing back a little bit or get a little more
Sure.
varied, but it's not coming back. People have seen the benefits and of course, like I still kind of miss getting together with people in person. I had a lunch meeting yesterday. I haven't had too many. Usually you get the odd one, but we used to do these all the time. And it was kind of funny because I actually did not book off enough time because everything was in Zoom, which meant I actually had a Zoom call in my car right up to the point, and then I run into the restaurant, and then we do that whole thing, and then I'm like, yeah, I got to go back to my car, back on Zoom. Okay, I got a little more planning here would probably help. But it was really nice to sit across the table from somebody.
Yes.
That's something that of course I miss, and I'm glad it's starting to come back, albeit I guess a little bit slowly.
Yeah.
How has the pandemic affected your business? Has it been has it generated a lot more for you or less, or what sort of happened with you guys?
So in 2020, we just stayed the course, where our goal was to keep our people as safe as we could possibly keep them, because we can't do our work unless we do it in person. So
yeah.
I'm very blessed to have an awesome team. And on my team, I have one of our people, her title is Employee Experience Manager. She's got 20 years in public safety. She ended up being our COVID officer, and she was a godsend. And I had put her, that position had been developing over 3 years. And so that was a godsend. And we really focused on the best possible delivery that we could give to our clients with our employees first and foremost. So we made sure that our clients understood that our employees come first. You don't. And so we're going to be taking care of them, and we will take care of you as best as we possibly can in that. And our clients were awesome. They're just to a person. They were phenomenal. This year, I think we all thought it was just going to be better. And this year has actually been harder. It's not as scary. 2020 was scary, but everybody was scared. I think everybody has so much pandemic fatigue that they really wanted this year to be different. And so we came out of the gates pretty strong. And what we saw in our industry, but not only in my industry, some colleagues of mine in other industries saw this too. The anxiety level in workers was really high, and we lost people because of that, not being able to function anymore. And so we ended up very short-staffed, and then we started recruiting, and we spent all of April, May, June, July, and August recruiting. And, we did a little hires here and there. I decided to start an internship program to see if I could get interns in. That was a mixed bag, but, we learned from it. Then we did the internship again for the fall, got some people, that was good. And I have now just onboarded 8 new people. All of a sudden, all the work we did, a shift in the market, I don't know. And so that has been what I've been navigating, and trying to nuance, instead of being angry about it, trying to nuance connecting with Indeed, trying to nuance connecting in LinkedIn, nuance IG, Instagram and Facebook, and programs to have our employees earn money if they can bring potential recruits through. So that has been the biggest, nobody told me that. Nobody told me that was going to happen post-pandemic. I don't think anybody knew.
No.
And coupled with that is that in the fall of 2020 through this year to this date, I have more work than I could possibly deliver on. It is absolutely astounding, to the point where I have to turn people away. I have to tell people next year. And the only limitation to building and fulfilling the work is building my team. And so my front and center all year has been team building. That's everything I do. I'm a gardener of people now.
Yeah, yeah. And I've heard that story from other completely different industries, because it's hard to attract staff. They're looking for different ways to attract staff through, and making it a fulfilling job. That's how, not I'll pay you an extra buck or two an hour. No, it's how do you make it fulfilling? And there seems to be challenges across the board for staffing, and a lot of movement in staff too right now. And the thing is, like, I think all of this weird disruption, it's going to be a little bit weird like this. I think it's going to be another year. It's just going to be, it's the aftershocks, the little bounce back here. I think it's just going to be quite a while until it really just starts to settle back into a bit of a groove, whatever that groove is.
Yeah, and I think the groove will be a little bit different, because what I'm seeing is that we're seeing a lot of employee poaching, lots and lots, and it's not for $1 an hour; it's for $5 an hour, $6 an hour.
Yeah,
it's for big money, especially when you work with a population that gets overtime. So the money that's being thrown around right now is it's unsustainable. And so we're trying really hard not to play that game. We're trying really hard to do the work of internal culture, making sure we're redoing I've redone my org chart twice this year already. I look at it all the time. I'm always working my org chart and job descriptions, and we sort of like job ladders, like looking at the career ladder, where are people going, how are they going to evolve in their business so that they can see their future, because a lot of people don't look at their future. They sort of need you to do it. I feel like the next wave, and maybe I have no right saying this because I don't have any clairvoyant qualities, but I feel like what might happen is that a lot of people hired in a way to get people now, just to get through the work that they have to do. I think we're going to see huge layoffs, because there's no incentive to keep people anymore. So I think we're going to see huge layoffs. And then what they're going to do is they're going to wage correct through the layoffs. So if normally you would be paid $20 an hour, but I've just hired you at 25, I'm going to lay you off and I'll hire the next person at 20, because nobody's paying 25 again.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like that's like the inkling that I'm getting, because some of the rates that are being charged right now, I know that if we do the math, they can't be passed off to the client so that it's profitable on the business side. The math just doesn't work out. So we'll see.
And we've seen that in tech. In fact, one of the guys I was talking with yesterday mentioned the same. Like, we've seen a lot of movement in tech. The scary part with tech is you definitely can work remotely. So there's several stories of literally salaries doubling. In fact, the one yesterday I was hearing about was over double, and over double going from a Canadian firm to a New York one, which meant triple almost, or whatever it was. Like, there's no competing on that at all. It's just, there's nothing you can do. Right. And I don't think we're like in the tech industry here. That's not over. That's going to go for a while. Right. Yeah. And it's going to be more persistent or more prevalent, because people are so comfortable working from anywhere now.
Right.
So it's going to be, I think, a bit of a challenge. So, but I didn't realize it was in other industries too,
Yeah. And so I feel like this goes back to that idea of that vision, and setting that vision for your company, and then being able to look at that org chart next to the vision and tweak the org chart, and then start to work your recruiting and look at the people you have and help them to see how they may, move up or go deeper in a position. I feel like that work right now, especially in my coaching. So in my coaching, I'm doing a lot of that, because most owners in my space they're owner operators. So they're really out there working their what they do. And a big part of what I do is I help them to go from kind of that self-employed, I own a job, to let's move into being a business owner, where you help other people develop in their jobs or careers, but you could step away. Like it doesn't depend on you. And I think evolutionary in business, that has been a huge shift for me. And I'm still shifting, because I think what we do as entrepreneurs is we peel the onion. We say, okay, you'll do this now and I won't do it. I'm going to still do all these things. Okay, I want to peel this off and now you're going to do this. And little by little, and that onion has a lot of layers. And I'm seeing right now, as my focus changes toward business building, team building, culture setting, vision setting, future casting, all of that work means I'm not designing your landscape right now. I'm not at the nursery tagging plants for you. And I realized that, that's the next thing I got to peel off. And so I think it's really interesting. And I think a great exercise for all entrepreneurs is to always say, you know how like when you have a client list, you always say, okay, can I get rid of the bottom 10%? You're always kind of looking what you can shed. I think as entrepreneurs, one of the best things we can be doing right now is looking at what we're doing. Look at your calendar, look at what you're doing, and ask yourself, what can I peel off? Who do I have already in my team that's itching to do more? And how, because I think that's the evolutionary equation, so that we can get to that new level and maybe avoid some of the devil, because we're not dragging everything with us.
Yeah. And that's a hard transition that almost every entrepreneur has to go through, because almost every entrepreneur I know, including myself, comes in as sort of like a domain expert, and then works their way up and has to let go. There's very few that come in with a business degree, and you do sometimes, but and start a business, and they're in that sort of strategy and operations side or from the start. And it is that point where you just kind of have to let go and let go and let go until suddenly, like, you're just a totally different role and a different person, that are, a different position than you ever thought. That's what sort of happened to me now, is, being a CEO, as that was not what I pictured how many years ago. And this is a very different, I'm solidly very much like I started out as a designer, right? And suddenly I'm like, I'm an entrepreneur, like through there's no, and a CEO, and I have to do that. There's no one else lined up behind me to do it for me. Right. So it's on my shoulders, and it's a transition that it's so effective for a business when you make that transition, and you start working, like they always say, on the business rather than in the business.
Yeah. And time blocking, so that you're doing it just a little bit, and then that little bit is more and more and more. And it's like, I don't know, it's like lifting weights or learning to dance or doing yoga, right? Like at first you feel stiff and awkward, and, and you do a couple more reps and you find that you get a little stronger. And I think that it's shifting the mind of the owner to, like, just like you said, I didn't see CEO. I was a designer, but then I started to see CEO and realize, oh, okay, because you can still have that design expertise. It's not like someone's saying you may never design again. The great thing about being a CEO, if you want to, I know that for me, I can cherry pick a project. If I want to work on a project, I can. The question is, if I don't want to work on a project, can I not, but still have it in my company? That's the real work. And I think that's where we grow. And I definitely didn't know that when I was starting. When I was starting, it was like, "Ooh, give me another hat. I'll just keep putting hats on."
Yeah, exactly. It's like, we can do everything. And it's but it is a funny transition from wearing all these hats. But I do look back at times when I first started my first business, and very briefly it was just me, myself, and I, right? And I was kind of doing the projects and making money, and then fast forward a number of years, and all of a sudden it's like, yeah, I got to do more every month just to keep the doors open. And it's like, I don't know if I'm getting paid that much more, but boy, the risk sure went up, and the responsibility sure went up, and that keeps growing and growing and growing, right? And you can't really go back. You just got to keep moving forward, right?
Right. Absolutely. And I think, for me, part of it is And I suspect you're probably doing the same thing, but it's codifying what you do. It's time to take that domain expertise out of your mind. And writing a book, that was the idea. Like, how do I codify what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, and outline those steps so that I can get it out on paper. And I thought that would be linear. I thought that would be a linear progression. Just think it and put it on paper. Yeah, not so much, because it's almost like you end up doing some of your domain expertise, your design, whatever you're doing it. It's kind of in this cellular memory. Your hand just does a certain thing. Your eye is looking at a certain thing. You know the math of it, you know the structure of it, you just know it. And so when you have to backtrack and teach it by putting it into a book, you realize that, wow, there's a lot to this, you know. And I found that was really helpful, and that actually helped me to, I mean, I'm not saying everybody should write a book, but I think that even if it's like, the first thing I wrote was an ebook on cash flow for landscapers, which I give away free, because I wanted to share something that I had learned that became critical to my being able to get to that next level, and just share it for free. And so I kept doing that until it became very clear to me that a book was the next step, because I had too much in here and I needed it out. And ideally that book will be part of how I develop that next onion peel. You know, so that I can say, hey, this is the platform from which I'd like you to spring in order to be a designer here.
Well, and tell me about that book, because like, of course, the first one you talked about, cash flow, of course, always close to my heart. But no, tell me about this next book that you've written.
So the full length book that I wrote a bunch of ebooks, and and most of my ebooks are free. And they really, the reason for writing short, 12, 15, 18 page books was to, like, I do a lot of conservation work, and I found that every time I would do a conservation project, I had to educate the client. And so by writing the ebook about how to work with the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection and go through the permitting process, made it so I'd be like, okay, just download that ebook, read that, and then we'll get going. So I was seeing traction in those books that I had written. And the cash flow book in particular got a lot of traction. It's still my highest downloaded book. And so what I realized was that as a conservation specialist, as somebody who works in sustainable practice and regenerative landscape, my intention is to run a business with a triple bottom line mission, which is, to focus on the planet, focus on the people, and be profitable. And that it has to sort of be in that order, that, without a planet, people kind of have nowhere to be. And without people, it's really hard to have a profit. So I thought, well, how am I doing that? How am I thinking that through? And I asked myself, what are the questions that clients are asking me all the time? What are the questions that the clients are asking me, the employees are asking me all the time? And I backed into, how would I develop a project? How would I go from point A to point B to point C, and so on? So I started with dreaming, which is, just, I have a dream to create something beautiful, and then move from the dream to visioning, which is a little bit more concrete, and then from visioning to planning, and then from planning to designing, and from designing to estimating, where you're getting all of the nuggets, and then from that to the process of construction. And what I've found is that, especially in my market where we struggle with DIY, because DIY has gotten so popular, so do it yourself movement, is that DIY will only look at the small slice. So if we're talking about, let's say, building a patio, they'll say, oh, I need patio block. How much is the patio block? And how much time will it take me to put the patio block down? They're forgetting that you've got to have a base, you've got to truck the material out, then you've got to truck material in. You need all of these other pieces. So I was trying to tease it apart so that a homeowner could buy this book and be empowered to work with a contractor. And a contractor could buy this book and be empowered with language to educate their client. And that if I could get this book into the hands of, people who are enthusiastically interested in developing land, either from the client side or the contractor side, that I would elevate, all boats would elevate, and I would be doing my job for the planet, and ideally doing my job for the people, and keep doing the profit.
Yeah,
That
exactly.
really, profit wasn't in my mind really with the book. It was so much about educating. It was so much about bringing an idea to people that would help them be more successful in the landscape process.
Yeah. So what's the name of the book?
It's called Stop Landscaping, Start Lifescaping.
Stop Landscaping, Start Lifescaping. And where can people find it if they're
so you can get it right on my website. So my website is thegardencontinuum.com. I got a little shop button in the corner, and you can just click on the shop and go to the book. And if you want a signed book, I can sign a book and send it to you. But also all independent bookstores, and of course, Amazon.
Okay, terrific.
Yeah.
Excuse me. This has been a lot of fun. We're actually like getting close to the hour here. So I could talk probably for another hour on this. This has been really interesting. But I thanks so much for coming on the show. It's been really terrific. How, well, you mentioned your website. Any other ways that people can get hold of you if they'd like to talk with you?
Yeah, best way is Instagram. That's my happy place. It's Monique.Allen. And I actually just finished a really cool 30-day Instagram live challenge, which was super fun. I was talking to a group of people, and I don't know, and accepting this challenge. And it was really, really fun. And I just dropped business ideas for 30 days at lunch. And it was super cool. You can definitely hop on there. You can follow the Garden Continuum from there, or just DM me. Yeah.
Yeah, terrific. Well, thanks so much, Monique. This was just such a fun time, really interesting conversation. And again, everyone, if you're looking for some help, financial modeling, cash management, you're trying to get hold of your finances, especially if you're a CPA or a fractional CFO and you're helping your clients with something like this, please come check us out at Dryrun. We would love to talk with you. Thanks again, Monique. This was a really fun conversation.
Thank you. It was fabulous.